With that, thank you very much for being here, and we are ready for you, sir.
Chair Parks, thank you. Members of the Budget Committee, it's nice to see you again, and I look forward to our conversations. I think what I'm going to do is just go through this and offer some comments on the PowerPoint, and then take your questions or comments. So our mission is pretty straightforward. We've had it for a long time. There are a couple of things I'd like to bring to your attention. One is the word justice that's on this. It's something that's, in my opinion, widely misunderstood. I think it is the fundamental thing we do in our work. Because we do our work case by case, person by person, crime by crime. These are all individual people or peoples in a case, and individual defendants. And so the kind of way we get a fabric of justice is to make these individual calls case by case. And the most important thing to victims, and I've been in this business now for 35 years, is not safety. It's justice. And I think I've grown to appreciate it more as I've gone through my career. I don't think I understood it as much when I started. But this craving people have for justice, we see it all, the Me Too movement. It's all about people craving a sense of justice. And there's a wide variety of how people see that. We see that every day when we talk to victims. We just had a meeting with our prosecutors about a vehicular homicide out in Washington County we're doing. It's a very difficult factual case with people who knew each other. And the victims have different feelings at different times. We listen, and we try and incorporate that into what we do. But in the end, we want them to have a sense of justice. And part of that is listening to them. And part of it is trying to find a punishment that is proportional to what the person did and their criminal history. I can't emphasize that enough. And when we get into measurements, I'm going to bring that up again, because how do you measure that? How do you measure justice? It's very difficult to do without distorting it. For instance, do you want to measure it by conviction rates? Well, maybe you would, but that would be, in my opinion, a bad mistake. Because the way to fix conviction rates is to only try easy cases. That's not necessarily justice. Justice is, you can talk to our prosecutors, some of you have, you get a sense from them. We struggle with this. So I just offer that. Now, and the other thing is that we are always trying to provide the best service to people. That our components are we listen, we answer, we explain. I tell our folks all the time, we should be able to explain anything we do. Even if people disagree with us, they should be able to get an explanation. We return phone calls, we answer emails. And we've been doing this the whole time I've been there. And again, it's part of that service. And ultimately, what we're looking for is people making good decisions. That's a quality we look for in the people that work for us. You have to have skill, and you have to have a great work ethic and all of that. But ultimately, you've got to make a good decision. And I get educated by the prosecutor's office all the time who come to me and talk about a case, and I realize they're struggling with that. So we offer you opportunities to come and watch us do it and Measure 11 meetings and other things and talk to us, because that's what we're shooting for. These words mean something to us. So enough said. The structure of our office is pretty straightforward. It's been like this. They're not equal. These three divisions are not, or whatever we call them. We don't really have a division or a title. They're just parts of the office. But they're not all the same size. Criminal prosecution is the largest. It's where most of our prosecutors are. Our victim assistance offices are smallest, but it has a very important role. And we want a victim's voice in everything we do. So our management team has our victims director is part of our management team. 3-year trends. I'll be honest with you, I looked at this graph and I drove Bob and Brandy crazy saying, so why is that number this and this? And I've got all those things if you want them. It has to do with where you ended up with an actual budget and how your next budget's built, because we always underspend. Those of us who've done this before, you know that. We work hard to underspend because we get to keep the carryover. So we try and save money. So it can look a little funny if you're comparing a finished budget with a new budget. So having said that, I'll be glad to answer any questions if those numbers jump out at you. Most of our budget is people, and most of our budget is general fund. And I'll get into why that matters and how we think about our budget when I get to emerging trends. FTEs, this is our FTEs. I'll tell you that in 2007, we had 85.5 employees, FTEs, and today we have 78. I would bet we're one of the few places in the county that's actually shrunk. And we did this intentionally. Over 10 years ago, I came to this after many budget cycles already, both at the state and here when I was in corrections. I realized in the county budget, if you're a general fund office, you've got a fundamental problem. Your revenue that you're relying on grows slower than your costs for your employees. It's a structural problem. You know the numbers. And I thought, we've got to be smarter about this. We've got to save money, or we're going to be going to the commission every year, more money, more money, more money. And we do that anyway, but for a different reason.
So what's different?
But he's doing
For a
it
different
smarter.
reason. And so we started focusing on technology and streamlining with the goal to protect direct services. And direct services, I mean people that touch the public. Obviously, that's prosecutors, but it's victim advocates, it's child support collection agents, it's investigators. These are the people who actually go out and talk to people and try and work with them. And that's what we want to preserve. And Brandy has picked up the gauntlet, and I'll go into what we're doing in a little while, but we've been on this track, and at our peak, we were down about 12, 14 employees. We've had to add something back for a variety of reasons, but we anticipated shrinking again over time. Because if we don't do this, we put you in a very difficult position. And as I've told the county administration before even Don got here, I think every office ought to be doing this. I think personally, my philosophy is, if technology doesn't save you jobs, then tell me why we should be buying it. That's the technology we've bought, saved us jobs. So, not that we lay people off, but we have people who leave and then we don't fill the jobs. So it's been pretty painless for us. Our proposed budget is, as you see, mostly criminal prosecution, as I explained before. And what's something when I always learn things when I look at our budget that I didn't realize was happening. And I just want to share this with you. Our Victim Assistance Office is only supported 32% by the general fund. And our Family Support Office is only supported by the general fund at 17.5%. Now, there are reasons for that, but our prosecution office is mostly all general fund. So that's kind of how we operate. And I've seen some trends that I'm concerned about in victim assistance with the grants. We're very dependent on grants now, which we were when I came, and then we got off them, and now we're back on them again. So the feds are offering a lot of money for victim assistance, and we're taking advantage of it. Performance measures. I remember before Don, everything's before Don, and we calculate things. At least I do, anyway. But I think it was two.
BD, is that right?
BD.
It was two before you, actually. When we started having, we were asked to do performance measures. And we've kind of kept the same ones, most of them. We've added a few here and there. And they're there for you to see. As I said, justice is very difficult for me to figure out how to measure, except by every day paying attention to what we do. And then the measurement is, what does it look like to the public? So, and I'm proud of the work our people do on that. But we've also tried to focus on efficiency and effectiveness. And you can see the things we've done. We've tried to promote the early resolution of cases to save money and overtime for police. And having them come to court and easier on victims and all sorts of things. We've got a number of alternative resolution programs which are up there: community court, drug court, mental health court, domestic violence, deferred sentencing, DII, and then we have a violation eligible for first-time shoplifters. If they have no prior, we make it a violation at arraignment. We've been doing these all for a long time. And we have about in 2003, the courts had a budget problem, the state courts, and so they announced they were going to close the court one day a week for 6 months. That made all the problems go away. So we saw as an opportunity, because we were very inefficient in the way we resolved cases. Everything went to trial. It was a system we inherited. Nothing got pled out beforehand. So we set up a case manager system where every case goes to a case manager hearing 5 weeks after arraignment, and we try and settle it there. We make an offer sheet that has the offer at case manager and the offer at trial, because we think most offenders are kind of concrete thinkers, and they need to see what they're buying. So,
A lot of truth to that.
and we've had a lot of success in reducing the number of cases set for trial. You can see we only set for trial. It's gone up, unfortunately. That has to do with the jail, we think. But it's still under 20% of our cases ever get set for trial. We resolve the rest. We have a lot of failure to appears which result in warrants. And so this year we partnered with the courts to do a couple things. First, we asked for some state money for release officers. Most counties have them. We've never had one. And we got some state money to buy two that I want to have work for the court eventually. And what they do is go out and check what the person's really working and really got a place to live. So we do a better job of who we release is actually going to show up. And that reduces the warrants. And then the second thing we did, we started what we have unattractively called ERD, Early Resolution Docket. And that is selecting cases. The courts told us, and we knew this, there's certain cases that the person, it's a low-level crime by our measurements, not by the people being affected, but they're misdemeanors, low-level felonies. And the bail's very low, so they get arrested and then they get released and then they don't show up and then they get arrested and then they get released and then they don't show up. And eventually what happens is the court says, you're staying in jail till we get this done. And then the person sits for 2 months till we get the case resolved. And the 2-month sentence is actually longer than they would have gotten on the original case. So we thought, let's try and find those kinds of cases and make an offer at the first arraignment if the person pleads. Give the police reports right up front, get a special defense attorney there to help us solve it. And so we've been doing it now. We've got 30 or 40 cases so far we've been doing this on. We think we're going to expand it. We kind of had to get our feet on the ground with it. But those are some things we're trying to do to reduce these warrants, because the worst thing that can happen is a failure to appear, because what happens is the case stops, there's a warrant, everybody waits for him to be picked up again, they get arraigned, they get a new lawyer, and it starts all over again. It's very expensive, and it's very time-consuming. So the fewer failure to appears we can get, the better. So, let me see here. So, I might be taking up too much time. I apologize. Our victims' rights, for those of you who don't know, victims have constitutional rights that are enforceable, which means if we don't honor them, they can go to court and have a case reversed. Knock on wood, that hasn't happened. But we are very vigilant about making sure every victim is informed of their rights and makes decisions about how much they want to participate. And we do that religiously, and we keep track. Now, conversion to fileless is an initiative that Brandy has brought. Brandy Pelham, our office administrator, which some of you have met. Some of you met. Brandy's right here. Brandy came from a private practice environment and has really been a breath of fresh air for our office, as well as a hard worker. And we wanted to go electronic, and we did. We got a case manager system, but we have not let go of the files. So we got files paper and files electronic. And we've been waiting for the day when we were brave enough to actually put both feet in the boat. And because it's scary for trial lawyers to not have a file. They can know where everything is in a file. Lawyers know how a file is laid out, and things are happening in a courtroom, and they can go to the right spot and answer the court's question or raise the issue. And they're very afraid when they do not have the information that's quickly available. So how do we change the culture so that lawyers feel the same way about their files in a computer in the courtroom? Easier with the new lawyers, harder with the dogs like me. So, but we're getting there, and we're very close. And we had to bring in, and we had to hire an outside consultant. Was not cheap. I'm a cheap person, but this wasn't cheap, because we had to figure out a strategy to do this while we still got the work done, and not make everything come apart. So, it's a heck of a lot of work. It involves the whole office. The strategy we've adopted, which has been explained to me and I've agreed is a good idea, is do it little piece by little piece by little piece. So we're slowly, one little bit at a time, converting over. And when we're done, we'll get rid of the paper files. And we'll be a fileless office, the only one in Oregon. And we anticipate this is going to make us much more efficient. It's going to coordinate our work between the support staff and the lawyers better. And eventually it's going to allow us to be leaner. So this is a big deal. And my hat's off to Ms. Pelham and her staff for helping lead us through this. So emerging issues. I've explained the issue of revenue versus expense when you're all personnel and this structure. So, and this model that we have through FileList is really designed to be sort of a continuous improvement model that allows us to keep adjusting and keep seizing opportunities to be more efficient with the goal of protecting direct services. Oops, going back. So there's some things on here. The first is, if you want an emerging issues, crime is an emerging issue. I've given you some handouts. Let me quickly explain them. The first is a sheet. The difficulty with crime is the data is not very good at the state and federal level. It's a variety of reasons. It's how the feds collect data. They only collect it from certain crimes. And then we had a problem with technology in the metro area with the police agencies buying a system called Region that has not served them, and they've abandoned it now. And so if you go to the state website and look at crime, it looks like it's just completely disappeared a couple of years ago. So it's hard to look at patterns in crime off that data. It's very hard. So I've looked for other places. Because a while back I noticed our case counts were growing a lot. Because every month I get a list of the number of cases each deputy in the office has. So, and we kind of, that helps us understand, okay, how we doing? Do we have issues? So I started asking questions. Is the reason why we have higher case counts because we've got backlog in our system, or is it because of crime? So we went back and looked at intake, the cases coming in. And that's this sheet I gave you. Very pretty colors. And it has different kinds of crime types over 2 years. And you'll see we've seen a significant increase in crime measured by our intake, particularly in the area of property crimes. It has eased up in the last year. Last year it was not as high. It still went up. So that's one measurement. The second I gave you was 2 sheets on domestic violence, because we've been keeping this kind of data for a long time in this sheet. And then we made a graph here for you. I pulled it up right. And you can see domestic violence has gone up the last 2 years. And then finally, I've given you 2 sheets on recidivism. This is just for the county, not for the state, although it's available. And this data is pulled right off the Criminal Justice Commission website. We just convert it for our county. And there are 2 measurements, arrests and convictions. And I've had this conversation with Commissioner Humberston before. And I am very firm in my belief that the proper measurement, the best measurement, you look at both, but the best measurement is arrests. And I want to tell you why. If our measurement really is crime, in terms of how it impacts the public and how offenders are doing on supervision, the closest measurement, the most, is arrests. It goes crime, arrests, charges, convictions. That's just how it goes. The lower you go, the farther you are from crime. That's number one. And number two, there's a legal standard for arresting someone. And it's a significant legal standard. And these are arrests for new crimes. These are not arrests for probation violations or parole violations. These recidivism charges are just new crimes. And the legal standard is more likely than not, probable cause. And, you know, if they don't do that, the police can be sued for wrongful arrest. That standard matters. And be honest with you, having looked at thousands of police reports over my career, people that get arrested have done it. So there are the few exceptions. But arrest is a fair measurement of crime if we can't measure, in addition to crime. So to me, arrests are the most important measurement of recidivism, but both are, we need to track both. And I can explain why we have fewer convictions than arrests, if you would like. But as you can see, recidivism has been climbing. That's arrests for new crimes. I also gave you the crime data on Portland. Crime in Portland is exploding. No one's talking about it, apparently. And I think they will eventually when the public gets mad enough. And you can see on the chart, it's property crime is out of control. So, and be honest with you, we see that because those folks come into Clackamas County, and we see them when they're already on supervision in Multnomah County. And then it gave you two things on prison usage. This is a letter that I wrote to the Grant Review Committee at the state last November. And I think Commissioner Humberston is familiar with this off the Local Public Safety Coordinating Council, because the state was rattling its sabers that they were going to cut funding, some state funding. And I wanted to make the case why they were punishing the wrong people.
We agree on that one, by the way.
We do, even though we're not getting the money. But you can see on there that I included this prison usage chart. And it really doesn't do justice to the point, which is Clackamas County has been using far less prison beds than any big county for a long time, from the beginning. When Justice Reinvestment first started, they started giving us graphs, and we were way below everybody else. We didn't do that because somebody told us to. We didn't do that because we were trying to strike the right balance. We were trying to do justice. And what's happened is some of these other counties have been dropping a lot. They got a lot of state money, and they've been doing programs to divert people. Some of those counties now have crime problems because every county is not the same. And every county has different challenges about quality of life. And I mean, Salem has a lot of challenges with crime. They have lots of prisons, and people move to the prisons to live, the families of the people who live there. And it causes problems. So it's a complicated mix as to how a county tries to deal with its crime rates. So raw numbers aren't the only measure. But I just want you to understand, we've never been a county that sends a lot of people to prison. But our prison usage is up a little bit. We're still the lowest. But when you look at the crime and recidivism, it's a food chain. People end up in prison because there's been a crime committed somewhere. So those are the trends that I see. And then the last thing is our courthouse, which I'd be glad to talk to you about if you'd like to. Nothing if you don't work there. Don't go there.
Nothing about $90 million wouldn't cure, right?
180.
Well, whatever.
Closer to 200.
200 million.
More people use that building from this community than any other building in this county every day.
I'm not surprised. Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
We have questions from the dais. We're going to start with Commissioner Bernard, then Commissioner Humberston, and then Commissioner Savas.
Mostly mine are just comments. One thing is domestic violence. I think people are more, I don't know this for certain, more willing to take action than they used to be. That's why we see more of it. We certainly have better access than we had. So I'm really happy that that's occurring and that we're able to address these problems before they become generational, and many of them are already. But homelessness is part of probably our biggest problem, and why we have more crime, and that's why Portland, I'm sure, is lots of crime. But my question is more about marijuana. The voters voted for marijuana. Yeah. This is how I feel.
They voted. What am I supposed to do?
Well,
Oh, God, yeah.
well, we still have, and we're working on enforcing against illegal grows and stuff like that. And at one point, I heard that you weren't going to be prosecuting these people
For what?
for illegal grows not being licensed.
Crime.
Yes, it
It's
is.
very difficult to prove. It's very difficult to prove.
So that's your answer then.
No, we don't have any policy against prosecuting. They're very difficult for law enforcement. Can I respond?
Yeah, I want you to. That's why I asked.
Look, we just had a big conversation about this at HIDTA, High Intensity Trafficking Task Force. It's a big board I've been on for a long time. It's half federal, half state. A lot of federal money comes in and is given to drug task forces. So there are a lot of people at the table who are very involved in the whole conversation about illegal drugs at the state and federal level. It's an interesting group of people. And we had this conversation last week because there's a report coming out from them that's going to make it very clear that there's a massive overproduction of marijuana in this state.
80%.
And the state will do nothing about it. And it's not something we do. It's a regulation issue. And they won't regulate it. So that's the first thing. And so wait for that report to come out. The second thing is, for me, the voters spoke. And I think law enforcement feels this way too.
So do we.
We didn't think this was a smart vote. And I tell people, there's no marijuana in our office anymore. The problem's solved. There's more marijuana than ever. And there's more drug usage by kids than ever. You know, marijuana was illegal. Was not a crime for most people with small possession before. And making it illegal suppresses it. Yeah, the data is clear. The studies are clear about that. Making methamphetamine and heroin a misdemeanor, in our opinion, and I didn't follow my sword on it, but it's a dumb move. It's just a dumb move. It makes Oregon more friendly to drug users. But we follow the law. And the law is that virtually all marijuana is legal now. And it's all a bunch of technicalities that law enforcement isn't prepared to spend a lot of time on because it's not a good use of their resources. Get involved in all these arguments about it. It's a regulation issue because it's just like every other business now. And fundamentally, there's no willingness at the state, and this is my view now, but I think it's many people's view, that they will not do anything about it. OLCC, and they will not do anything about it. So, and we're exporting a bunch of drugs to states where it's illegal. And I kind of feel like that's not a good thing we're doing either. So this is complicated, it's political, and then we have it land in neighborhoods in our county, and it's difficult, and you hear about it. And I'm very sympathetic, but I'm not sure, and we're at the table, we're talking about it, but I'm not sure. I think we got to get the state to get involved and come in with their regulatory powers and stop this and first recognize it's happening. You know, the cost of marijuana has gone down a lot because there's so much marijuana. But it's a complicated subject.
Actually, your feelings are exactly in line with mine and with most of the commission, I think.
Right.
But our problem is a land use problem.
Yeah.
And a code violation. So what we ought to be looking at is citations, ticketing, and fines that we can lean against the property maybe.
And I agree, and the OLCC ought to be doing that.
Property
Yeah.
liens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's my
Okay.
opinion.
Right. Thank you,
Thanks.
Commissioner Bernard. Commissioner Humberston?
We can continue our debate
Oh, I'm
at some
sure
other
you're-
time on
you're
the issue
tired
of
of
how
it
we
by
measure
this
recidivism. And this is probably as much a matter of opinion as it is anything else, but I won't do that here. I do agree, and I want to make it a public statement that the standard by which the state is holding your offices with respect to incarceration issues is an unfair standard. And I will continue to articulate that where it's appropriate and when it's appropriate. We were very low in our incarceration rates, and so the way they set that standard makes it difficult for us to compete. And when you look at the fact that our population has grown by over 37,000 people in the last 10 years, I think you have to expect that some incarceration will go up. So hopefully we can continue that argument. I don't know where it'll get us, but it's worth a try.
Yeah.
I want to follow up on Commissioner Bernard's comments. If a deputy goes to a piece of property in which there is absolutely no license or permissions from the state to grow marijuana, why is that not a felony?
Well, it's a very good question, and I don't really practice law anymore. I go to meetings, so I'll have to go find out.
'Cause my thought is, if
That's
they've
not a
gone through...
cop-out, that's actually true. I have to go ask people who know. And I don't know the answer to that. The difficulty here is that now law enforcement thinks of this, it's not their issue. They can't do anything anymore. They've been told to stop. And so to get them started again is difficult. Now, we're willing to sit down and talk, but we're not regulatory offices. We're crime offices. So I think there are offices you should do this. But
I guess what I'm saying is if a person goes to the appropriate processes to get a license to grow marijuana, or to sell it, or to process it, and they go through all the legal process, they are not committing a crime, okay? Any more than somebody who goes through all the legal processes to make beer or wine or an alcoholic beverage.
Right.
If they do any of those things without the appropriate licensing, it's a crime. And so, to my mind, if an officer finds that occurring and brings a case to the district attorney's office, it ought to be a prosecutable crime.
well, nobody's brought us such a case, and if they did, we'd look at it. We're not saying we wouldn't prosecute anything. Nobody.
Okay.
If somebody told you that, they're speaking out of some other mouth, because we don't ever say that
Fair
about
enough.
we don't say that about anything. We don't tell people we're not going to prosecute. We just never do that. That's just not the way we work. That would not be responsible. But on the other hand,
Agree.
do we prosecute for crime people who run an illegal liquor store? That's not where we look for the remedy. They don't come to us. I don't even know if it's a crime. When I was a misdemeanor deputy, somebody gave me a case once with somebody had been charged with illegal plumbing. I dismissed the case. I was like,
Yeah, well,
they
that's
actually found a statute that said it was a crime. I said,
That's a
that's
code,
not
yeah.
my business. That's somebody else's business. So, and that's the
Yeah, that's a
way
code
marijuana
enforcement,
has moved now. So that's the way we believe, kind of feel that's the way it's moved now. The feds are different because it's still a crime for them.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
but if it's a crime, tell them to bring us the case.
Bring it, bring it.
We'll look at it.
I will quote you.
Yeah, that's about anything.
Well, you're on tape, so, yeah.
Yeah.
You don't have to
On
be
a
tape,
different
keep my
note, I just
word.
wanted to point out something, and I think it's noteworthy. You had roughly a $301,000 cut in income from a variety of sources, as shown on this document, and you managed to figure out a way to balance that budget and deal with that cut and get to a balanced budget, and I just want to commend you for that. I think I'm sure in your department that that's hard work.
Imagine so.
And then the final point I wanted to make, and this is just for the general public, when I started in law enforcement as a career, there was no such thing as victims' rights. That was not a cost that the government had to bear at all, and your office now has to bear that cost. And I think we need to remember that in terms of budget in the future, how we go forward, that's probably a cost that will increase. And that is a mandate that you now have, and we know that we are going to have to deal with it, so I'll leave it at that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Savas for the final comment, and then we can move on to treasurer.
Well, I don't know where to begin. I didn't know we'd spend that much time on marijuana, but as I heard this morning, the state,
We didn't either.
the OLCC's decided not to issue any more licenses for grows, as I understand it. as of
Until they
this
get
morning.
caught up.
That's because
Well,
this report's,
We'll see.
that's because this report's coming up.
There's 1,900.
That's why.
So maybe there's some good news there. Your comment earlier, John, about our best measure of crime is arrest. And what comes up when the sheriff's here often, one of my issues has been drunk driving arrests has actually gone down significantly. And, the argument has been, or discussion's been around, well, just less enforcement or less officers out there or something, but is drunk driving really going down? It's a crime, right? And I know that you're passionate about that. I know that's something that you hold near and dear to your heart. So I guess in that case, that's really not accurate then in Clackamas County. To say that drunk driving arrest crimes are down or up.
Gosh, these are hard and good questions or hard questions. I don't know. That's the bottom line. And we rely on the public to report crime in a lot of types of crimes. And then we rely on law enforcement to find the crimes, too. And the more serious the crime we know, the more likely it is it's going to be reported. Drunk driving is a product of enforcement. So if I was looking at drunk driving arrests and trying to figure out if it's really a reflection, which is very hard to do, I would look at fatalities and accidents, alcohol-related acts. I would look at different measurements to see if, in fact, lower arrests is reflected in the fact there are fewer fatalities and fewer accidents. That's where I would look. And then start talking about it. And I would ask law enforcement face-to-face, what do you think? Because they have a sense of it. They talk to people, they see things. So I think we've been successful in suppressing drunk driving over the last 25 years, a lot of it with public disapproval, which is very powerful. But I don't know the answer to whether drunk driving is down. I do not know that answer, and I'm sorry I don't.
And I just would say that I'm not, I'd love to have a great measure of what measure of crime really is, but I say that if marijuana arrests are down because of the way the state's policies are, that doesn't mean that the marijuana use is really down. But there again, part of it's legal, and part of what we talk about here on the land use side is not legal. So I believe it was last week, one of your folks was here for a policy level proposal regarding the 1 point some odd million we have for. So my question is, do you feel that those monies being spent and the enforcement discussion we just had here for NLP type of a policy strategy that actually render results?
Again, I think we have to wait and see. I think, as you know, we've had a very proactive part of our office, small but proactive about community prosecution for a long time. And it's fun. It's based on the idea that we go out and talk to the community, and we pick a community that's struggling with crime. We picked Overland Park. I think we had a lot of success in kind of energizing that community to take control of their crime problem and work with us and not just wait for arrests. That's kind of the model. And now, and many of you know Bill Stewart, who inherited it from Dave Paul. Now we're focused on the area between Milwaukee and Gladstone, which has its own set of problems. And the Neighborhood Livability Project is an attempt to do that same sort of thing again. We sit down and listen to them, what's going on. They've talked a lot about zombie houses. They've talked a lot about the crime that's attracted with that. So we're trying to do something about that. We're looking at a LEAD program, a very targeted small LEAD program in that area. We're going to build in a measurement of it with a, what's it called? That Angela Hawken does, that micro randomized controlled trial thing she called. What is it called? Anyway, it's cheap and you can do a little randomized controlled trial. So we're gonna play around with it, and we'll see. I think we're trying to listen to the neighborhoods about, and this proposal is about that.
Let me just clarify it. So I'm a big fan of the NLP as it is today. You guys are doing an awesome job. Bill's, that whole program is awesome. I said that last week. I guess this avenue of it now is gonna be focusing on the marijuana aspect of it, right? Trying to do enforcement using the NLP model. So I'm a
Well, I'm
big
not
fan.
sure it's really
I'm a big
marijuana.
fan of the work that's currently underway. In that area you talked about, I live there, so I know it works.
Right.
I mean, great work. Not questioning that whatsoever. I'm just talking about the marijuana aspect of what's being proposed in this policy level proposal. Do you feel with this law enforcement or regulation or whatever the state issue with marijuana, that, spending or throwing a few $100,000 or $500,000 of taxpayer money or this marijuana money is going to render results?
We'll have to see, and I'll be honest with you, I think it's being done under the rubric of marijuana, but it's really about NLP.
Yeah. Well, I hope you're
I don't
here
want to
Tuesday.
wreck the funding, but we're trying to improve the quality of life up there.
Yeah, I hope you're here Tuesday when we talk about
Yeah,
that policy level
I
proposal.
support what they're doing.
Okay.
And Chris Owen is our point person on that.
So the other thing I wanted to talk about, John, and it's on your screen still, under the very first bullet, expenses outpace revenue.
Right.
I made this point on Tuesday when we started off our budget, that our trend lines, our overall budget shows, the jaws of death, revenue, our expenses outpacing revenues. Yours shows a modest, about a $1 million spread growing here, as I can read the chart, roughly. And most of the budgets today and yesterday show that very same thing. And the response to the administrator was, it was an anomaly of a couple things, but actually it's a trend that's showing up in a number of the budgets, not all of them, but a number of them. And so I'm going to leverage this opportunity to, number one, ask you how you plan to cope with it, and on the larger scale, with all the other budgets, how we all plan to cope with that. Because it's something I pointed out on the early onset on Tuesday, and it's still here today. You've accurately called it out, and I just want to looking ahead. How do we close that gap, or what do we do to close that gap?
I'll tell you what we've been doing, which is what we're still trying to do, which is, first of all, we try and save every penny we can, so we have carryover. And that's why those graphs those two lines, those graphs, I look at them every year and I think, well, we're not overspending. So, and the reason is we get a lot of carryover. And that's part of our plan, is to underspend and then roll it over. That's how we survive. And we do other things too. We've cut staff and other things. So I think everyone's going to be looking for opportunities to streamline and get smaller. But eventually, there's going to be more blood in the turnip, right? Because you got this problem. I don't know if it's 25 years. It might be after I leave, but 25 years, whatever. It's not going to work anymore to squeeze blood. It's just isn't enough. So I think at some point there has to be a conversation with the public about it. But it has to, and this is just me talking now, and I've thought this for a while. It has to be a different kind of conversation. And let me explain what I mean by that. I've seen so many times for years, people say, I hear government say, we don't have enough money. We don't have enough money. And then I watched every taxpayer I know go home and look at their property tax bill and say, we gave you more money. Why don't you have enough? And saying we don't have enough money is not the right thing. We have more money. The real conversation has to be about where the gap is and why it's a structural gap and how we need their help to close it. I mean, but we aren't going to get that unless they trust us, and because we've been telling them the truth. And that's, I'm pie in the sky guy. That's what I think. And I think we have to be honest with the public over an extended period of time before we ask them for something, which is close that gap so that we get as much money in as we need to cover our expenses. Not extravagantly. We still have to manage. We still have to do all of that. But they have to trust us to do it. And every time we say we don't get enough money, and they say that we do have more money, we never say the next thing, which is why. And they go home thinking, I don't believe them. I know a lot of people who think this way. They don't trust government. Now, there are a lot of reasons why people don't trust government these days. Everybody's got their list. And it's an American tradition to not trust government. We're built on it. We were built on a revolution. It's a rich tradition. So, but I still think we just have to, we need their help. This is never going to, eventually, well, there'll be no government. I mean, if this model continued. And we buttress it with a lot of federal money and some state money, because state is different. They have income tax, so it's different. But anyway, I'm sorry to talk so long.
Well, so I have my last question, and that is courthouse. More courtrooms, I assume more staff. Have you done a projection of what that, getting back to, it's really the same conversation, but now with an expanded new courthouse, looking in the future, have we done any projections and costing of what just the O&M, the operations and maintenance of a new, larger courthouse?
Well, you have our projection for FTEs, which is we anticipate we're going to shrink.
Pardon?
You have our FTE, I think I gave that to you. Did I give it? You have the FTE chart.
So that's reflective of the new courthouse?
No, we don't have that. We didn't give them that list. Do you have that, Brandy?
I didn't see it.
Way behind.
Further.
We're actually right now, right on
projections
schedule
on
because we were
FTEs.
behind before. You just like to make.
You want to hand it out? Yeah, would you do that? Would you give that
Move
out?
approval.
If we have it here, we brought it. This is a projection, which we'll give to you. We tried to do things and only give them out if you ask for them.
Supplement.
So you can see, we're going to project we lose a few more employees. But we really haven't done the whole courthouse thing because, to be honest with you, we've been talking about a courthouse my whole career, if it's ever happened. But I anticipate that we would want to design our courthouse space so we could save. And that we're still in the process of talking about that. But one of our goals would be if we centralize, can we get some savings in operation? I don't know yet.
So a judge and a clerk and all the people that staff a courtroom, that comes out of your budget, right? No, state budget? Okay,
All the courthouse employees, state budget.
thank you.
Thank you very much.
Sorry.